The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council gleamed with its usual splendor, but today the atmosphere was heavy with fear. Representatives from 100 different species sat in the circular chamber, their worried whispers echoing off the crystal walls. At the center of the room, High Counselor Robert Gray watched the holographic display with a grim expression. The display showed another world burning. The Ravagers, a species that had emerged from the dark space between galaxies, were destroying everything in their path. Their ships looked like giant black thorns, designed to pierce through both ships and planets with equal ease. "The warrior clans of the Steel Arm Galaxy have fallen," announced the messenger, his blue scales reflecting the red glow of the burning planet in the hologram. "They fought bravely, but—" Admiral James Stone of Earth sat quietly in his corner, watching. Unlike the other representatives who wore elaborate armor or flowing robes, he wore a simple black uniform with minimal decorations. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago, and most species still viewed humans as weaklings who hid behind walls and machines. The High Counselor turned to the warrior races first. Who will stand against this threat? The Battleborn, a race of 8-foot-tall warriors, stood up first. Their leader, a scared veteran named Rock, spoke clearly. "We have studied the enemy. They are too strong, too many. Even our best warriors would be slaughtered. We must decline." One by one, the warrior races, species that had built empires through combat and conquest, refused to fight. Each had their reasons. The enemy was too powerful, their numbers too great, their weapons too advanced. Then, in the silence that followed, Admiral Stone raised his hand. The chamber erupted in laughter. A warrior from the Fire Plains, his skin glowing like hot metal, pointed at Stone. "The humans? The race that builds walls around their cities. The people who run from fights." Stone stood up slowly. His voice was calm but carried across the chamber. "We've studied the Ravager attacks. We've analyzed their patterns. We don't promise victory, but we will fight." "With what?" someone shouted. "Your primitive weapons, your tiny fleet." The Admiral walked to the center of the chamber. He pressed a button on his wrist computer, and the hologram changed. It showed Earth's history, not the grand battles, but the small ones. Guerrilla fighters defeating larger armies. Resistance movements surviving against overwhelming odds. Clever tactics defeating superior forces. "You call us cowards," Stone said, "because we don't rush into battle singing war songs. You mock us because we build walls. But we build walls because we value life. We fight carefully because we understand the cost of war." The chamber grew quiet. The High Counselor leaned forward. "And you believe you can defeat the Ravagers?" "No," Stone replied honestly. "But we believe we can find a way to survive, and maybe even win. Not through strength alone, but through strategy, through careful planning, through using every advantage we can find." The Fire Plains warrior laughed again, but this time fewer joined him. The High Counselor studied Stone's face carefully. "The humans have survived countless wars on their own world," the High Counselor said thoughtfully. Perhaps there is wisdom in caution." Stone nodded. "Give us access to the data about Ravager attacks. Let us analyze their patterns. Give us 2 weeks to develop a strategy." 2 weeks. The Fire Plains warrior spat. 3 more systems will burn in 2 weeks. And how many will burn if we attack blindly and fail? Stone countered. "Sometimes the bravest thing is to wait, to plan, to prepare." The High Counselor stood up. "The Council recognizes Earth's offer. Admiral Stone, you have your 2 weeks. Show us what your cautious approach can achieve." As Stone walked out of the chamber, he heard the whispers, felt the doubting looks. But he also saw something else. Hope in the eyes of the smaller races, the ones who had lived in fear of the warrior races for centuries. Back on his ship, Stone looked at his tablet. Reports were already coming in from Earth's analysts. The Ravagers were strong, yes, but they were also predictable. They had patterns, and where there were patterns, there were weaknesses. The Admiral smiled slightly. It was time to show the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous opponent wasn't the one who rushed in with guns blazing, but the one who waited, watched, and struck at just the right moment. The real war was about to begin. 2 weeks passed like a blur in the Earth's Forward Command Center, established on a neutral space station. Admiral Stone stood before a massive holographic display showing enemy movements, while Captain Tom Miller and his tactical team worked tirelessly analyzing data. "Look at this pattern," Miller said, pointing to a series of red dots representing Ravager attacks. "They always strike the strongest military target first. It's not about strategy. It's about proving their strength." The room was filled with screens, maps, and tired humans who hadn't slept properly in days. Coffee cups littered every surface, and the air smelled of determination and energy drinks. A group of alien observers watched from the back of the room, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely hidden contempt. The Fireplanes warrior, who had introduced himself as Blast, stood with his arms crossed, radiating disapproval. "Your time is almost up," Blast announced, "and all you've done is stare at screens and drink your bitter stimulants." Miller ignored him, focusing instead on the hologram. "Sir, I think we found something. The Ravagers have never faced an enemy that refuses direct combat. They don't know how to handle an opponent they can't find." Stone nodded, walking around the display. "Show me the simulation again." The hologram changed, showing a new scenario. Small ships, painted in dark colors, moving through asteroid fields and debris clouds. Hit and run attacks. Traps set with cloaked mines. Communication disruption tactics. "This is cowardice." Blast exploded. "You would hide in shadows like vermin." Stone turned to face him. "Tell me, warrior of the Fire Plains, how many of your people died in their last glorious charge against the Ravagers?" Blast's glow dimmed slightly. "We died with honor." "And what good did your honor do for the civilians you were protecting?" Miller asked quietly. "The ones the Ravagers killed after your warriors fell." The room fell silent. Even the other alien observers shifted uncomfortably. Stone walked to another display. "We've studied Earth's military history, the American Revolution, the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan conflicts. Time and time again, smaller forces have defeated larger ones by refusing to fight on the enemy's terms." Miller pulled up another simulation. "We don't need to defeat their entire fleet. We just need to make the cost of victory too high. Humans are very good at being annoying when we want to be." The simulation showed small, fast ships attacking supply lines, disrupting communications and vanishing before the larger Ravager ships could respond. It showed decoy fleets drawing enemy forces into prepared trap zones. It displayed electronic warfare techniques that could confuse enemy targeting systems. "This isn't war," one of the alien observers protested. "This is pest control tactics." "Exactly." Stone smiled. "We'll be the pests they can't exterminate. The thorns in their side. The constant, irritating, exhausting enemy that never stands still long enough to be crushed." Miller stepped forward. "We've also analyzed their ship designs. They're built for head-on combat, with heavy forward armor and powerful front-mounted weapons. But their rear defenses are weaker. They never expected an enemy to get behind them because no one ever tries. Everyone's too busy trying to prove their bravery." The simulation showed human ships, painted in light-absorbing black, slipping past the Ravager fleet's front lines to strike at vulnerable rear sections. "We'll need help," Stone continued. "Fast ships, stealth technology, and most importantly, crews willing to fight smart instead of dying brave." Blast had been watching the simulations with growing interest, despite his obvious desire to dismiss them. "Your people would truly fight this way, without seeking glory or honor in battle." "Our only glory is in victory," Miller replied, "and protecting those who can't protect themselves. Everything else is just ego." Stone checked his watch. "The council meeting begins in an hour. We'll present our strategy then." He turned to the alien observers. "You've watched us work. You've seen our plans. Will you support us?" The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, one of the observers, a small creature with crystalline skin, stepped forward. "My people have always been considered too weak for war. But these tactics, we could do this." Others slowly nodded. Even Blast seemed less hostile, though his glow still pulsed with uncertainty. "Then let's go convince the council," Stone said, gathering his presentation materials. "It's time to show the galaxy how the cowards of Earth go to war." As they left the command center, Miller looked at the final simulation still playing. A massive Ravager fleet, being torn apart piece by enemies they couldn't find or fight. Maybe, just maybe, this crazy plan would work. The Ravager command ship hung in space like a massive black thorn, its surface bristling with weapons. Inside, the Ravager commander watched with growing frustration as another scout ship disappeared from their sensors. 3 weeks had passed since the humans began their campaign, and nothing made sense anymore. The mighty Ravager fleet, which had crushed every opponent in direct combat, was being picked apart by an enemy they couldn't even find. Captain Miller's voice crackled through the encrypted channel as his stealth ship slipped through the debris field. "Strike Team Alpha. Execute Pattern Delta. Remember, hit and fade. Don't get greedy." 5 small ships, painted in light-absorbing black and barely larger than fighter craft, emerged from their hiding spots. They struck the Ravager's supply ships from multiple directions, their advanced weapons targeting engines and communication arrays. Before the larger combat vessels could respond, the human ships vanished back into the darkness of space. "Cowards!" The Ravager commander's roar echoed through their bridge. "Face us in proper combat." But the humans weren't listening. They were too busy setting up their next trap. On the bridge of the Earth command ship Shadow, Admiral Stone watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Ravagers had lost 32 ships in the past week, while the human fleet had lost only 3. More importantly, the enemy was starting to show signs of frustration. "They're breaking formation again," Miller reported. "Just like you predicted, sir. Their aggressive nature can't handle our tactics." Stone nodded. "Prepare the next phase. Let's show them why patience is a virtue." The human fleet had scattered mines throughout the sector, but these weren't ordinary explosives. Each one contained a powerful electromagnetic pulse generator and a small FTL drive. When triggered, they would jump to pre-programmed coordinates near enemy ships before detonating. "Strike Team Beta. You're up," Miller commanded. "Draw them toward Point Echo." More human ships appeared, this time making themselves obvious targets. The Ravager vessels, eager for a real fight, took the bait. They charged forward, weapons blazing, finally having an enemy they could see. "They're in position," Miller announced, executing Operation Thunderclap. Hundreds of mines activated simultaneously, jumping into the middle of the Ravager formation. The electromagnetic pulses disabled shields and weapons across the enemy fleet. In the chaos that followed, human ships struck from all directions, targeting the now defenseless vessels. On a nearby observation platform, Blast and other alien representatives watched in amazement. "This is not how war is meant to be fought," Blast muttered, but his tone had changed from disgust to curiosity. "Perhaps that's why you were losing," replied the crystalline alien observer. "Look at how they use the enemy's strength against them. The Ravagers expect honor in combat, so the humans give them dishonor. They expect direct confrontation, so the humans strike from shadows." The battle continued to unfold. Human ships would appear just long enough to draw enemy fire, then disappear while another group struck from an unexpected direction. They used electronic warfare to confuse enemy targeting systems, holographic decoys to waste Ravager ammunition, and careful timing to ensure they never faced the full might of the enemy fleet. "Sir," Miller called to Admiral Stone, "the Ravagers are attempting to regroup. Their formation suggests they're preparing for a mass jump to escape." Stone smiled. "Just as planned. Signal all ships to fall back. Let them run. Let them run." Blast stepped forward. You have them at a disadvantage. Press the attack. Watch and learn, Stone replied calmly. The Ravager fleet engaged their FTL drives, jumping away from the battlefield. Moments later, alerts flashed across the human command screens. Multiple contacts at their exit point, Miller reported with satisfaction. The second fleet was waiting exactly where we predicted. The Ravagers jumped right into another trap. The observers watched as the tactical display showed more Ravager ships being destroyed or disabled. The once mighty fleet was being dismantled piece by piece, not by superior firepower or brave warriors, but by careful planning and patient execution. Your people fight like, Blast struggled to find the words. We fight like humans, Stone said simply. We fight to win, not to look brave. And it's working. The battle continued, but its outcome was already clear. The galaxy was learning a valuable lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest claws, but the one with the patience to set the perfect trap. As another Ravager ship disappeared from their screens, Miller turned to his admiral. Sir, should we prepare the next phase? Stone nodded. The Ravagers are learning that bravery without wisdom is just suicide. Let's see if they're ready to learn some more painful lessons. The massive Ravager fleet approached the Centauri system, home to over 12 billion sentient beings. This was their largest force yet, a desperate attempt to prove that they could still dominate through sheer power. 300 warships, moving in tight formation, ready to obliterate anything in their path. Commander Mary Walker stood on the bridge of her stealth ship, Ghost, watching the enemy approach. Her small team of infiltration specialists checked their gear one final time. Everything had led to this moment. Command, this is Ghost, she spoke quietly into her comm. We're in position. Admiral Stone's voice came back clearly. Understood, Ghost. You have permission to execute Operation Shadow Strike. Good hunting. The Ravager command ship was massive, nearly 2 miles long, bristling with weapons. But Walker and her team had spent weeks studying its design, finding its blind spots, analyzing its weaknesses. They'd practiced this mission 100 times in simulation. Team, sound off. Walker ordered as their ship drifted closer to the enemy vessel, hidden by their advanced stealth technology. Engineering ready. Weapons ready. Tech team ready. Their ship was tiny compared to the Ravager vessel, barely larger than a shuttle. But that was the point. The enemy was looking for warships, not infiltrators. Beginning approach, Walker announced. Remember, we only get one shot at this. The Ghost slipped through the Ravager fleet's formation, using their own ships as cover. The massive vessels were so focused on scanning for threats ahead that they never thought to look between their own ships. Contact in 30 seconds, the pilot reported. We'll have a 3-second window to attach to their hull. Walker took a deep breath. Make it count. The Ghost moved with precision, matching speed with the command ship. There was a slight bump as magnetic clamps engaged, securing them to a maintenance access point. Cutting team, you're up. 2 engineers went to work with specialized tools, designed to breach the Ravager hull without setting off alarms. They discovered this weakness during previous battles. The Ravagers were so confident in their superiority that they'd never considered someone might sneak aboard rather than attack directly. We're through, the lead engineer reported after several tense minutes. Internal atmosphere is holding. Walker led her team through the breach. They wore light combat suits, designed for stealth rather than direct combat. Each carried a backpack of specialized equipment. Remember, Walker whispered as they moved through the dark corridors, we're not here to fight. Plant the devices and get out. Let the technology do the work. They split into 3 teams, moving through the massive ship like ghosts. The Ravagers, arrogant in their strength, had never developed internal security systems as advanced as their weapons. Why would they? No one had ever dared to board their ships before. Each team planted small devices at key points, engineering junctions, computer nodes, power distribution centers. The devices were specially designed to interface with Ravager technology, uploading viruses and causing cascading system failures. Command, devices are in place, Walker reported 20 minutes later. Beginning extraction. Negative. Ghost. Stone's voice came back. We have a complication. The Ravagers are preparing to fire on the civilian evacuation ships. You need to trigger the devices now. Walker looked at her team. They all nodded. Understood, Command. Triggering devices. Be advised we may not make it to extraction. She pressed a button on her wrist computer. Throughout the massive ship, the planted devices activated simultaneously. Lights flickered. Weapons powered down. Navigation systems went haywire. Communication between ships became garbled nonsense. The mighty Ravager fleet, pride of their species, began to drift out of formation as their command ship lost control. Move, Walker ordered her team. They sprinted back toward their entry point, even as chaos erupted around them. Ravager crews ran in all directions, trying to understand what was happening to their unbeatable ships. The Ghost detached just as internal explosions began rocking the command ship. Behind them, the mighty Ravager fleet fell into disarray. Their carefully coordinated attack transformed into confusion and panic. Ghost to command, Walker reported as they sped away. Operation successful. The Ravager fleet is compromised. From his command center, Admiral Stone smiled. Well done, Ghost. The cowards just took down their flagship without firing a shot. As her team celebrated their success, Walker watched the tactical display. The mighty Ravager fleet, which had terrified the galaxy, was now adrift and vulnerable, defeated not by superior firepower, but by a small team willing to fight smarter rather than harder. The tide of war had finally turned. The Galactic Council chamber was packed, but this time the atmosphere was different. Where once there had been mockery of human tactics, now there was keen interest. Representatives from various species leaned forward in their seats, watching as Admiral Stone presented the latest battle reports. The Ravager fleet has lost 60% of their combat capability, Stone explained, pointing to the holographic display. But more importantly, they've lost their aura of invincibility. Blast, the Fireplane's warrior who had once scorned human tactics, stood up. His glowing skin pulsed with excitement. My warriors have studied your methods. Last week, we used your hit and fade tactics against a Ravager patrol. We destroyed them without losing a single ship. Similar reports came from other species. The crystalline people had adapted their natural camouflage abilities to create better stealth ships. The high-gravity worlders had developed new ways to use their dense materials for armor-piercing weapons. Captain Miller stepped forward, bringing up new tactical displays. We're entering Phase 2 of our strategy. Now that other species are adopting our methods, we can coordinate our attacks more effectively. The hologram showed various alien ships, each using different aspects of human tactics. Small, fast ships darting through debris fields. Stealth vessels setting traps. Electronic warfare ships disrupting enemy communications. The Ravagers still don't understand, Miller continued. They keep trying to force us into direct battles. But now nobody's giving them what they want. They're fighting shadows and getting frustrated. A tall, reptilian admiral from the Outer Rim spoke up. My fleet used to lose 3 ships for every Ravager vessel we destroyed. Now, using your tactics, we destroy 5 of theirs for every one we lose. Stone nodded. The key is to abandon the idea of honorable combat. There's no honor in letting your people die needlessly. True courage is doing whatever it takes to protect those who depend on you. The council chamber buzzed with excitement as more success stories were shared. Species that had never worked together were now coordinating their attacks. Traditional warrior races were learning the value of patience and strategy. Commander Walker, fresh from her successful infiltration mission, took the floor. We've developed new training programs to help other species adapt our tactics to their unique abilities. The Ravagers are strong, but they're inflexible. They can't adapt as quickly as we can. She showed footage from recent battles. A fireplane ship using its natural heat signature to create false targets. Crystalline vessels becoming nearly invisible against the starfield. High-gravity worlders using their dense ships as mobile cover for smaller attack craft. The Ravagers call us cowards, Walker said, but look at the results. While they're still trying to prove their bravery, we're winning the war. Blast stood again, his globe now steady and bright. My people were wrong about humans. We thought courage meant charging into battle singing war songs. You taught us that true courage is being willing to fight smart, to put aside pride for victory. The High Counselor raised his hand for silence. The statistics are clear. Since adopting human tactics, our combined forces have increased their combat effectiveness by 300%. The Ravagers are losing ground on every front. Stone brought up one final display. A strategic map showing Ravager territory shrinking as the combined forces push them back. They still have powerful ships and brave warriors, but bravery alone isn't enough. They never learn to adapt, to think differently. That's why they'll lose. The chamber erupted in approving shouts. Species that had once looked down on humans were now eager to learn from them. The term cowardly was being replaced with strategic and efficient. Miller watched it all with a slight smile. "Sir," he said quietly to Stone, "do you think they understand yet? That sometimes the best way to win a fight is to change the rules." Stone looked around the chamber, at all the different species working together, learning from each other. They're starting to. And that's what will win us this war, not just our tactics, but teaching others to think differently. As the meeting continued, plans were made for more combined operations. The galaxy was learning a valuable lesson. True strength wasn't about having the biggest ships or the bravest warriors. It was about being smart enough to fight on your own terms, and wise enough to learn from those you once thought weak. The war wasn't over, but its outcome was becoming clearer every day. The cowards were teaching the galaxy how to win. Admiral Stone stood before a holographic map of Ravager-controlled space, his eyes fixed on their last stronghold. After months of successful guerrilla warfare, the enemy had finally retreated to their home system, a massive binary star system protected by natural radiation fields and dense asteroid belts. They fortified everything, Captain Miller explained to the assembled fleet commanders. 3 rings of defense stations, minefields, and their remaining ships arranged in defensive formations. They're done running. Commander Walker studied the defenses. They finally learned from their mistakes. No more charging out to meet us. They're dug in and waiting. The command center was packed with representatives from 24 species, all now veterans of the new style of warfare humans had taught them. Blast, his fiery skin dimmed to a thoughtful glow, pointed at the outer defense ring. "Even with our combined fleets, a direct assault would cost us too many ships," he said, having fully embraced the human way of thinking. "We need something different." Stone smiled. "That's exactly what we're going to give them. Something completely different." He pressed a button, and the hologram changed to show a new type of ship. Meet Project Trojan. The assembled commanders leaned forward. The ship looked like a damaged Ravager vessel, its hull scared and burning. Miller took over the explanation. "We've captured enough of their ships to understand their construction. These are perfect replicas, designed to look like badly damaged survivors from their defeated fleets." He paused for effect. "Each one packed with our best stealth teams and electronic warfare systems." Walker nodded in approval. "They'll want to recover their own ships. Their pride won't let them abandon their vessels." "Exactly," Stone continued. "Phase 1. We launch a series of small attacks. Nothing serious, just enough to keep them focused on their outer defenses. Meanwhile, these damaged ships will drift through their lines, broadcasting Ravager distress signals." The hologram showed the plan in action. As the fake battles drew attention to different sectors, the Trojan ships would slip through the gaps in their defense. Phase 2. Miller picked up. "Once our ships are inside their perimeter, We trigger a massive electronic warfare assault. Every Trojan ship will release hundreds of electronic warfare drones. Their communication networks will be flooded with false signals, their sensors blinded. Phase 3. Walker added, my infiltration teams, already inside their defense perimeter, will disable their central command and control systems. Their coordinated defense will fall apart. Stone showed the final phase. The rest of our fleet will attack from multiple vectors, using the confusion to break through their lines. Not in one massive assault, but in hundreds of small, coordinated strikes. The best part, Miller said with a grin, is that they'll be expecting us to do something sneaky now. They'll be looking so hard for our tricks that they'll overthink everything. Sometimes the best deception is letting your enemy know you're going to deceive them. The commanders discussed the plan, suggesting improvements and adjusting details. The former warrior races, who once would have demanded a glorious frontal assault, now debated the finer points of deception and misdirection. How many ships do we need? Blast asked, already thinking about his fleet's role. That's the beauty of it, Stone replied. We don't need overwhelming force. We just need enough to keep them distracted while our real attack comes from within. The Trojan ships are the key. They'll never expect us to turn their own pride against them. The plan was complex but elegant. It played on the Ravagers' psychology, their pride, their inability to abandon their own ships, their newfound paranoia about human tactics. Even their recent attempts to be more cautious would work against them. One more thing, Stone added as the meeting concluded. We've detected significant civilian populations in their home system. Our primary objective isn't destruction. It's victory with minimal loss of life. We're not like them. We don't need to prove our strength through body counts. The commanders nodded in agreement. They had learned that true strength lay in achieving victory while preserving life, not in glorious but costly battles. As the meeting broke up and commanders headed to prepare their forces, Miller turned to Stone. Sir, do you think they'll ever understand what really defeated them? Stone watched the commanders leave, each one now a master of the tactics they had once mocked. Maybe. Maybe they'll learn that the greatest power isn't in weapons or bravery, but in being willing to set aside pride and find a better way. The final battle was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Ravager home system blazed with weapons fire, but not in the way anyone had expected. Project Trojan had worked better than even Stone had hoped. The damaged ships had been taken in for recovery, just as predicted, carrying their hidden cargo of infiltration teams and electronic warfare systems deep behind enemy lines. When the attack began, the Ravagers found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see or predict. Their communication networks were flooded with false signals. Their sensor arrays showed phantom fleets appearing and disappearing. Their carefully coordinated defenses fell into chaos. Commander Walker, leading the infiltration teams, stood in the captured Central Command Center of the Ravagers' main defense station. All teams report success, she announced over the secure channel. Their command structure is broken. They can't coordinate their responses anymore. Outside, the combined fleet struck from all directions, ships from 24 species, each using tactics they'd learned from humans, tore through the confused Ravager defenses. The once mighty warrior race found themselves caught in the same kind of trap they'd fallen for countless times before. Main defense ring is breached, Miller reported from his command ship, moving to Phase 4. Admiral Stone watched from the flagship as his plan unfolded. The Ravager ships, trying to fight back, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to behave according to any rules of war they understood. Small, fast ships darted through their formations, striking vital systems before vanishing. Electronic warfare vessels turned their own communication systems against them. But the real surprise came when Stone opened a channel to the Ravager High Command. "This is Admiral Stone of Earth." His voice rang across all frequencies. "Your defenses are broken. Your fleets are in disarray. But we're not here to destroy you." The response was a growl of defiance, but Stone continued. "Look at your tactical displays. Our ships have bypassed your military targets and now surround your civilian centers. We could end your civilization right now. Instead, I offer terms." There was a long pause. In that silence, the Ravager commanders must have realized the truth. The human fleet and their allies had achieved what no force had ever managed before: complete tactical superiority over the Ravager home system. "What terms?" The response finally came. Stone's voice was calm but firm. "Surrender your military forces. Join the Galactic Council as equals, not conquerors. Learn to coexist rather than dominate. You would show mercy." The Ravager commander sounded confused. "After all we've done." "Mercy isn't weakness," Stone replied. "It's wisdom. We fight to protect, not to destroy. That's the lesson we've been trying to teach you all along." The battle slowly died down as the Ravager forces received orders to stand down. Ships powered down their weapons. Defense stations went dark. The great warrior race had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by superior strategy. In the council chamber days later, Stone stood with Miller and Walker as the Ravager representatives signed the peace treaty. Blast, now a respected voice in the council, watched with satisfaction. "They called us cowards," he mused. "Now they ask us to teach them our ways." Stone nodded. "Sometimes the greatest courage is knowing when not to fight." The Ravagers were brave, but bravery without wisdom is just wasted life. The galaxy had changed. The warrior races had learned that true strength wasn't about overwhelming force or glorious charges into battle. The smaller species had discovered they didn't need to be physically powerful to be effective defenders of their worlds. As the ceremony concluded, a young Ravager commander approached Stone. "We were wrong about humans," he said quietly. "We thought you were weak because you were careful. Now we understand that your caution comes from wisdom, not fear." Stone smiled. The strongest warriors aren't always the ones who rush into battle. Sometimes, they're the ones who think, plan, and find a better way. The war was over, but its lessons would echo through the galaxy for generations. The species that had once been mockingly called cowards had shown everyone a new way of thinking about strength and courage. As Stone looked out at the assembled representatives of a now peaceful galaxy, he knew that the greatest victory wasn't defeating the Ravagers. It was teaching the galaxy that true courage comes in many forms. And sometimes the wisest warrior is the one who knows there's always a better way than blind aggression. The cowards had saved the galaxy, and in doing so, had redefined what it meant to be brave.